This is from a new collection of stories called Mindful Creek, and this is a story called The Plane of Primary Focus. Let me tell you, it wasn't as bad as seeing a picture of your house on fire or your dog flattened in the road by a 4x4 with some kid grinning stupidly beside it, both of which have happened to me personally. Not quite the front page, but also ran back of the hometown section either. The fire was a measly grease thing started by you-know-who when he decided to fix me a nice New Year's Eve dinner after he came home from an afternoon of drinking with the woman from work, the one he keeps calling my buddies, as if I'm too dumb to stick my finger in the air to see which way the wind is blowing. She calls here all times of day and night with these little problems a third grader could fix. Anyway, you-know-who was frying shrimps when the dish towel caught on fire, followed by the frying pan swimming pool for 4 inches of hot oil, enough that Willie Nelson called to see if he could recycle it for his tour bus, I told you-know-who. Okay, that wasn't the worst of it. Harry, that's his name, managed to toss the grease on the kitchen curtains and the teapot wallpaper, busted out the window when he tossed the pan through it, don't ask, and my neighbor caught it all on her Christmas present digital camera before she called the fire department, thanks a lot. Her claim to fame for the new year, you might say. So that got things rolling pretty good. The kitchen's 2 inches deep in ice, the appliances look like ice sculptures, and we're sleeping in our clothes despite blocking off the door. New Year's Day didn't get much better. There we were in the newspaper, hugging each other like we meant it, flames leaping out the kitchen window like they'd take the whole house any minute, the neighbor kids cheering it on, arms in the air like they'd just scored a hockey goal. Then she showed up. Honey, she cooed to you-know-who, if you need a place to rest up. And she handed him hot cocoa laced with peppermint, schnapps, and cinnamon, my special recipe for his ice fishing excursions. Oops, she said, I forgot to bring you some too. Isn't that silly? She flashed me one of those smiles that showed off a whole mouth of teeth you knew just had to be dentures. There's a filthy joke about her in that mouth I'm not going to tell you right now. Okay, Lynetta, I know how hard it is for you to keep more than one thing in your mind at once. I grinned right back, despite the yard snow starting to melt from the heat of the fire and the flowering crabapple limbs smoking next to the house. Lord Jesus, don't let my tree catch on fire, I prayed silently. It's the one grows so nice since I put my no-good brother's ashes around it. I could only hope that it could stand more than one kind of conflagration. Well, that drama went on for another hour, and it was well and good dark when the fire truck drove off. The men crouched inside, icicles hanging from their shoulders. I was all for moving to the hotel downtown that's been redone so nice, but Harry was worried about looters. The only thing robbing us is that woman, I muttered as we made our way across the frozen pond that used to be our front yard. The neighbor kids were already running for their skates, and by the time we managed to dislodge enough ice to shoulder the front door closed, which is when I discovered that we'd locked her inside instead of out. She looked at the water creeping across the living room rug, tiptoed to the sofa with the recliner at each end, and curled up in the middle, putting her shoes on the Afghan my grandmama knit the last 20 years of her life, then up and died as soon as she tied off the last strand. You might say it has a place in my heart, but only because she was so damn mean, not a soul was sad to hear that last breath rattling all shallow up out of her chest. We'd stood there looking at Grandmama for a while, then pulled the Afghan out of her clutches and folded it neat on the hall closet shelf so the paramedics wouldn't mistake it for hers. Then we called the 911 operator. We wanted to make sure she was good and gone, I guess. Too late to be revived. We'd made that mistake 3 times before, and in our family it takes a long time to catch on, but usually we do, given the chance to repeat ourselves enough. I wonder what she would say about that woman, Lynette, with high heels all dug into her life's work, as pretty as you please, the colors of the rainbow, each row as neat as the last. Lynette, take your shoes off, I said. Harry glanced at me, still a little drunk, despite the sobering fire. His eyes had that frowning, slightly out of focus intensity they get when he's trying to make things stand still. Honey, this here's... He looked at Lynette, trying to think if we'd ever met. Harry, sit down next to Lynette. I decided it was time we came to some understanding here. I was tired of my husband dating. But as soon as they sat down, they grabbed each other's hands and looked up at me like I was the judge, sentencing them to 30 hard for jaywalking. their faces uplifted, scared as children about to get a licking, and hoping there's some mercy in the world, some kindness still buried deep in the bone. It makes a person sorry to see that. I sat down in the old pleather armchair opposite, suddenly run out of words. Maybe it was that thing rattling around in my chest too, a meanness mixed with enough spit to knock me on my behind if it got loose. The very thing Grandmama was trying to utter when she keeled over, the Afghan clutched in her fingers. And if I said what I wanted to say, maybe it'd kill me too. So I looked at the floor instead, concentrated on the dark stain of water creeping under the glass-topped coffee table, racing in its slow, momentous way toward the 50-inch plasma television set we'd bought to prop up our Christmas. It was so big, the heads of people looked like giants, and my dog got scared all over again every time we turned it on. The surround sound bounced off the walls until it seemed like everybody was being murdered when they raised their voices. No wonder the dog was hiding under the back porch, refusing to come out no matter how cold it got when that thing was on. "You want to watch TV?" I asked. Harry's eyes were drifting shut, and he had that dampness on his upper lip he got when he was getting ready to pass out. Too much excitement. He made a pass at his forehead, trying to swipe the thin blonde strands that were sticking to the sweat, but succeeded only in rumpling the hair so he looked even more like a kid waking up, the kind of kid a mom would just naturally draw into her arms and kiss him for being so cute. A grown man, and he could still make me want to baby him. His girlfriend tucked in beside him, his fingers loosening their grip on her hand as his head fell back to the cushions. Lynette looked at him, then at me, then at their hands in her lap. "TV'd be okay, but we'd better get that door shut and put something down to block the water, don't you think?" The dog wandered in about that time, took a look at Harry, considered jumping on the sofa to lick his face until he woke up, but eyed Lynette and circled back out of the room, down the hall to my bedroom. He never slept with Harry on the couch. Well, I can't say why either. He just preferred to sleep with me. Rustolian was that kind of dog. It gave me a little lift, I will admit it, that he didn't take up with Lynette. When I got to bed later, I hugged that little dog right up close to my body, and we slept like that, deep and long, all the rest of the night, like he was my boyfriend, his fur warm against my nightgown, his breath smelling slightly of bacon. Now, where did he get bacon, I wondered in my sleep, and dreamed of both of us frying big pans of bacon and giving Willie Nelson all the used grease for his tour bus. That was New Year's Eve. When I woke up, Lynette was gone, and Harry was sprawled on his stomach on the sofa, his hand dragging in the wet blue carpet. It was already mid-morning, the sunlight pouring in the windows, and I noticed that Rustolian had pushed through the blockade and run outside through the kitchen door the volunteer firemen had chopped down. It was an Arctic cave in there, the light hitting the ice, making knives for the eyes. No use pretending I could get coffee or anything, although I did notice that my purse, sitting on the counter where I usually left it, was now an iceberg, prepared to capsize any vessel that came near its lumpy form. New Year's Day. I was hungry and Harry was still sleeping it off, so I quickly dressed, tiptoed out the front door, and fell flat on my face, sliding forward down the steps to the skating rink at the front yard. One of the kids stopped my progress by standing in front of me, so I ended up staring at the chewed-up black tape of his hockey stick. "Thanks," I said, using the stick to climb shakily to my feet, then hanging on his shoulder to inch across the ice to my car parked at the curb. Fortunately, the rider's side had escaped wearing an ice parka, and I nodded thanks to the kid who skated off grinning. The neighbors were out enjoying the view, pointing at my house. I stuck the key in the car door and raised my eyes. Santa's sleigh, pulled by reindeer that had been racing across the roofline for the past month in progressive runs of blue, red, and green lights, staggered off the edge, half melted, legs bent, backs bowed as if there had been a terrible accident with a chimney or something. It was really fad, let me tell you. Thank goodness my neighbor hadn't captured that picture for the newspaper. Harry and I had bought that set 2 years ago after he agreed to give Lynette up and come back home to me. It had sealed the deal, you might say. I later thought it was because the bell dinged when I opened the car door and Rustolian, lurking in the neighbor's bushes across the street from the ice rink, heard it and figured he could con me into taking him for a ride. That dog did love sticking his head out the window to let the wind knock his ears back and bare his teeth. In summer, when it was too hot to take him anyplace, I put the car in the garage and set up a fan so he could sit in there and believe he was going for a ride. He was a good dog. He believed anything I told him. The kid wasn't even sightseeing. That's justice for you. He was playing his gangster rap, driving his daddy's 4x4 with the gun rack full of pool cues and texting his girlfriend, going 60 miles per hour down our little side street, and God knows why Rust-Oleum darted out. To give them credit, the kids stopped their hockey game in our front yard and ran shaking their sticks and hollering until the young idiot jammed on the brakes and climbed out. I was going to stop, he grinned. I barely felt a thing. He glanced back at Rust-Oleum, who was deader than a doornail, just flat as a pancake. I can't say it any other way. He was gone. The idiot neighbor was right there with her camera, catching it all for posterity in the newspaper again. I can't tell you the rest because it makes me so damn sad that I hate to say it. You know how cold it was, the turn of the year, and it took me a while to carry poor Rust-Oleum back to the garage behind the house and lay him down on the old canvas tent. And I wanted to cover him up in case he could feel something, like the cold, in case it wasn't the way you think that you stop feeling right away, so he might still be feeling the cold and whatever else, and I didn't have anything, so I took off my coat and tucked him in as best I could, folding his paws up under the covers the way he liked, and even making sure his head was covered because he always slept in a cave of covers, safe and dark and warm, next to me. Inside, I didn't notice anything as I walked back to my bedroom and climbed in bed, clothes and all, trying to find the warm spot he'd left. And that was New Year's Day. What could be worse, you ask, than having your house on fire and your dog killed before your very eyes? In the middle of the night, I woke up thinking I heard something. No, that's not quite right. First I woke up because it was too quiet. Have I died now? I wondered, is that where this trail of crap is leading? Then I heard something I wouldn't have heard if there'd been any sounds of the living, like the hum of the refrigerator or the rattle of the furnace blowing through the old tin ducts, or Harry snoring in the living room. It was a snuffling, like a person crying or an animal sniffing around the outside of the house. The wolves are at the door, my brain cried out. I crawled out of bed and immediately threw open the closet door and dragged out my robe and a sweater. The furnace was off. I couldn't even see out the window. It was so thick with frost. Good God, I whispered, and shoved my feet in my icy shoes. There was still no sound from the living room as I crept down the hallway. The sofa was empty. The front door was wide open. Harry was drunk again. But there weren't any bottles. Was he sleepwalking? When had he left? Why hadn't he shut? It was like I didn't want to look. Like in a horror movie, the kind that sent Rust-Oleum running, but I had to. The door was wide open. Is this a dream, I wondered? No, I pinched myself to be sure, making such a deep mark with my nails that it took a month to heal, because as soon as I looked outside, I about tore that chunk of skin off my arm. Harry was flat out, just the way I'd been. The difference being he wasn't moving, not a hair. His face rested peacefully on the ice, bluish in the moonlight, his eyes and lips frosty white. A little puddle of dark had slid from his nose and glued his head down. His chest and back weren't moving at all. He was as quiet as could be. So you know I knew. I was about to get all morose and broken up about it, thinking about all the work this was going to mean. And that snuffling I'd heard developed into something else. Another noise altogether, like some animal trying to bark with a sore throat. I can't tell you what seized me then, but instead of calling emergency workers to revive Harry, despite his being frozen solid dead, I skated my way past the blackened walls of the kitchen, under the melting plastic reindeer legs, past the half-charred back porch to the garage doors, held shut with a cement block because they were so rotted they hung on their hinges and wouldn't latch shut. The noise growing louder and louder until I knew it was true. As soon as I slid that block out of the way, the door swung open and my dog came limping out, looked up at me with a short, exasperated growl, and headed under the ruined porch. I grabbed his tail and pulled before he disappeared again. He snapped back at me, but reluctantly followed as I led him to the front of the house. You'd think an animal, a family dog especially, would give a corpse a sniff or two, but Rust-Oleum only blew a puff of disapproval through his nose as he limped by. Maybe he'd been faking it all along, I decided. Licking Harry was just a joke or a show to keep the family peace. Maybe he thought Harry was just rotten. I tried to remember if the dog had ever shown any affection for Lynette, aside from peeing on her shoe one time when she brought over a shirt she bought for Harry on sale. I told her to buy me anything she found on sale, Harry had defended himself. She knows what I like. Rust-Oleum took a little longer to negotiate the icy steps and pad across the living room and down the hallway to my room. As soon as he was safely tucked in bed, I called it in, of course. I couldn't see leaving him there all night. What would the kids think? I'd counted on the neighbor having a flash on her camera that adjusted the light so she could take such clear pictures at night. And I hadn't thought about the fact that he was leaving with the keys to his truck until the photo in the paper showed them so clearly in his hand. The little silver disc with the photo of Lynette embedded in the plastic as bright as you please. And even though the accidental life insurance paid double, and the house insurance took care of the kitchen, and the neighbor woman's husband got up on the roof and dismantled Santa and his disabled reindeer, I still don't feel good about all those pictures in the paper. Especially the one showing Lynette at the funeral crying harder than me. I knew what she'd lost, and it was much, much more than me. And I couldn't pretend otherwise, I guess. I had my dog back, and that was all to the good. Though he's never been quite the same after the accident. He growls at me and sleeps a lot now. Doesn't want to be hugged either. I think he's still hurting inside, maybe. His bones all cracked and not quite healing. I do what I can to make it easier for him to get around. I built a little ramp over those stairs and went out and dumped 50 pounds of salt on the ice rink yard. Nothing's going to grow there for a long, long time. But I guess I don't really care anymore. That's the hardest part. Thanks.